Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. It's another day of judging book covers today. I said I was going to do this one a little while ago, looking at the covers of titles that are coming out in 2023. It's taken me a little while to compile a suitable collection, but I've got that for you today. So all of these are titles that come out this year. Some have already been released, but most of them you can look forward to in the coming months. So I'm going to put all of these covers in different categories based on my personal enjoyment of them, how much I like those covers. So it's not a reflection on how good they are or how bad they are. It's literally just what they mean to me. Do I like them personally? So I'll relocate to my desk and we can take a look at those covers. So this isn't my first rodeo. I've got my nice little background template with my categories on it, and if you've seen one of these videos before, you'll know how it works. But for those who haven't, I've got 5 categories that I'll put these books into based on my own personal sort of thoughts and feelings about the design and the colours and everything else on the cover. So at the bottom I've got not a fan. These are, well, it's self-explanatory. I don't really like these covers for whatever reason. It's okay, but not for me is the next one up. These are the covers that are okay, but I don't personally kind of gel with the theme. So it's not necessarily that I don't like it, but overall it's just not quite hitting the mark for me. Then we've got a solid cover. These are the not necessarily middle of the road ones, but these are ones that are a good solid cover, but they just lack that little oomph for me. Those ones tend to be in I like it a lot, the next category up, where they're not quite perfect, but some of these are going to be close to it. These are the really nice covers that I do enjoy looking at. And then at the top we've got the Chef's Kiss, which are the creme de la creme, the covers that I really like the most. So let's start off. I've put these in alphabetical order with kind of one exception, which I'll come to when I get to it, but we start off with Age or Sin by Daniel T. Jackson. I've read this book, absolutely loved it. The cover would definitely have sufficed as an Illborn cover. It's got the same imagery that you have kind of portrayed quite a lot in Illborn, book 1 in the series. Overall, I quite like this one. It's not perfect for me. It's one which is definitely grown on me. I didn't really like it that much when I first saw it, if I'm honest, but I know my wife quite likes it. I know some other people quite like it. It's an okay one for me, but not one that I really like. So I've put this one to start us off with in a solid cover because I think it does a good job. Next up we've got A Barrow of Winter by H.M. Long, and this is a really kind of odd one. I don't mind this cover to start off with. I think it's pretty decent. I like the kind of negative space of the person there with the spear in this this bare head kind of thing, and I like the mountains underneath it as well. The reason that I say this one's a bit weird is because it's quite it was quite difficult for me to actually get a decent size or resolution image for this cover, because most of the ones that I found, I don't know if they were concept images or what they were, concept covers, but they had kind of a double bear face on there. You look at the bear in the background and here it kind of looks normal, but in most of the images that I found, certainly in the big images, it had 2 sets of eyes, teeth, nose. It had where the nostrils are there was another set of eyes, and in the teeth there were 2 sets of top teeth and 2 sets of bottom teeth, and it just looked really bizarre. But I'm not going with that one. I'm going with this one that you can see on your screen. It's okay. I quite like it. Again, it's not one of my perfect ones, but it is one that I do have a bit of time for. I'm going to put this one in a solid cover as well because I think it is. Okay, next up we have The Basilisk Throne by Greg Keyes, and this one is one which is very different actually from most of the covers that I've got on my list. It's just a very different design. First of all, I don't really tend to gravitate towards these almost minimalist covers, the ones where you've got just the background basically and then an icon essentially in the middle of it. This one does have a little bit more to that because it's got a pattern to the background which I actually quite like. I think it works quite well. And it's got the, I can imagine that is gold foiling for the vine patterns down the 2 sides. And again, I quite like that. The colours work really well with the black, with the little kind of shades of almost grey in it, and the gold there. And then for the silver and gold and little hints of blue for the main image on the middle as well. I think it works okay. It's not really for me. It's not one that I would always pick off the shelf, but I think it does do a good job, and I like the overall design, although the artwork isn't quite for me. I'm going to put this one as well in a solid cover because I think it does a good job. It's one that shares a design kind of concept with many good covers that you see. Things like Wheel of Time and A Song of Ice and Fire do tend to have this almost minimalist design to them as well, and I think it definitely does work well for a fantasy book. So I'm going to put it in the middle category for that purpose. So the next one on the list is one of the most recent cover reveals that I've seen. This one came to my attention only a couple of days ago. This is the third book in the Beast Hunters series. It's called Blood Oath and it's by Krista Lender. And straight away, I really like this. There's not actually that much going on in it. It's a phoenix, I believe, because there's little kind of wisps of flame in there, and you've got the colour as well, and I think it really works well. I like actually that the background is kind of a muted tone of that same colour rather than being a different colour to offer contrast. I think it works really well in that respect. The artwork is really, really nice. I definitely like that, and I think overall it just works really well. I like this enough that I'm actually going to put it in the chef's kiss category because it just really, really looks great. Okay, next we have Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. This one is a novella, I believe it is, and it's one that's going to be, I think, quite popular because the author has got a really good following. As far as the cover goes, I'm a bit torn on it. There's some aspects of it that I quite like, and there's some aspects of it that I don't really like. I think overall, it doesn't really work for me. The kind of symmetrical city, I prefer a little variation on there. The silhouette in the background just looks a little bit strange sitting in that V of Haven. And although I like kind of brushed steel, I think it's a really nice kind of pattern, if you want to call it that. The almost brushed steel effect that you've got here doesn't quite work for me, where you've got all of those different elements, and they're different on the top and bottom as well. So in the top you've got more colour behind the city, and in the bottom you've just got the kind of red to white kind of pattern there, almost a gradient. And it just, I don't know, the sort of solid black at the bottom as well doesn't really work for me. I don't quite understand that. So there's a few good bits to it, but overall I think this one sits for me in the not a fan category because I think it just doesn't quite work for me overall as a book cover. Next we have the book that I'm reading at the moment. This is The Bloody Chorus by John Marco, and it's one of, I don't know how many covers there are in this particular video, but it's an artist who frequents these videos because he's pretty much synonymous with, especially the self-published fantasy market, but with some of the great covers that have been coming out recently. These have been designed, the artwork at least, by Felix Ortiz, and some of those have been a bit hit and miss for me. There's some that I don't like at all, but most of them, to be honest, the artwork really helps paint a picture, if you like, that I really enjoy, and this is one of those. I think it works really well knowing the story because I'm reading it at the moment. I understand what's happening there, I understand what the elements are, and I think that definitely helps build the appreciation. So you've got the beast ships, you've got whale dragons there as well, or dragon whales, I can never remember which way around it is, but it's a very interesting story and it's a very interesting cover. I think for me, the one thing that knocks this down is the text at the bottom. I like the titling, first of all. I think the font choice and the design of the actual title and author name is very good. Not so much the line underneath telling you that this is the author who wrote The Jackal of Nar and The Eyes of God. But what I really don't like on here as much is the paper that's on there. It takes up too much space for me. I would have preferred this if the artwork took up more space. You've got the title maybe over the artwork, but the parchment that's there takes up, well, it's nearly half of the cover, and I think that spoils it just a little bit. Overall, it's still a really nice cover. I definitely like it. I just don't see enough there to elevate it to that top category, so I'm going to put it in the I like it a lot category because I do. I like it a lot. Next we have another one that's come out recently, or the cover at least has come out recently, and a lot of people are talking about. This is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. And there's a lot of nice elements in here, but overall it doesn't quite work for me. I know a lot of people absolutely love this, and that's absolutely fine for them, but for me, yeah, it again, that symmetry, I would have preferred a little bit more variation there. You can tell that it is kind of mirrored. There's elements that are definitely replicated on the other side, and there's a few little changes, little colours and things like that to make it not a direct mirror, but it is pretty much a mirror image down that middle there. The titling I don't like. I don't think it stands out enough against that background. It's all a little bit samey in terms of the colours. Overall, as far as a book cover goes, yeah, I think it works. The general kind of layout with the author name at the top, the little blurb at the top above that, the title down at the bottom. I'd maybe put book and that on one line to just minimise that a little bit. But overall, I think it's the colours. And admittedly, I'm not a big fan of the artwork behind it. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't appeal to me quite so much. Being a reader, and this is a massive library, that should be good. But for me, it just needs a bit more than that. So overall, it's okay, but it's not for me. Next up, I've got the second book in the 8th Chance series by Alain Marché and Christopher Warman. This is A Contract in Sulphorn, and this one, it's okay. I don't mind the artwork on it. I don't mind the overall design. I quite like the titling on it. It doesn't really, for me personally, have anything special though. So this one, I don't really have a vast amount to say. It's okay. It's not perfect. I would say it's a good fantasy book cover. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in that middle category. It's a good, solid cover. It's odd that I've only just at this moment noticed that I have 2 books by the same author on here. This is another one from H.M. Long, and this is Dark Water Daughter. And I was going through these with my wife. She really quite likes this cover. I like the colours on it. I like that kind of deep, vibrant blue. But again, like a couple of the other covers on here, it's just a little bit too samey in terms of the colour in the background. The text really stands out from it, so I appreciate that. I like the font that's used for it. Overall, it doesn't really work for me. I think it probably does a good job for the book that it's portraying and maybe the target audience, I don't know. But for me, it's one that I would say it's okay, but I'm not a massive fan of it, so I'm going to put it in that second bottom category. Next we have Defiant, Songs of Chaos Book 3 by Michael R. Miller. And I really quite like the cover actually of the first and I think also the second book in this series. This one I think for me is the weakest of the 3. I don't like it quite as much. Again, I think it just needs a little bit more spark, a little bit more colour variation to make it really stand out. Sometimes that really works, like with the Beast Hunters book earlier on, but for this one, I think it just looks a little bit too muted for the overall colour palette here. I think it looks almost a little bit out of focus. It's not, but it looks almost a little bit kind of blurry to my eye just because of those matching colours. In a way, for the story, I like that the colour matches between the armour and the dragon. There's very much a symmetry between the character and the dragon, but overall, it's not the best cover for me. I don't like the publisher name there, Monolith Books, being on the front cover as well. I think that just takes a little bit too much away because that's kind of bold and bright, and you've got the author name close to it in the same colour, but it doesn't seem to stand out as much as the logo there. So that's a down kind of mark, I guess, for me. I'm going to put this one in a solid cover because I think it is. I think it does a good job for a fantasy book. It's got a nice dragon on there and people like dragons on their cover, but it's not great. It just needs a little bit more for me. Next I've got Descent to the Sunken Cathedral, which is New Paladin Order Book 3 by Charles C. and Kenneth W. Cromwell. And this one's got a lot of the elements on it that I really like. It's got a character facing away from you so you can't see the face, and I do quite like that. I think it's maybe a little bit understated in a cover like this, but I definitely prefer that, so you can make up your own mind about how a character looks. And of course, faces can be difficult to get right as well. We can see here he's got a sword, he's got a cape, he's got magic of some description, so it looks pretty cool. You've got a nice scenery, you've got a dragon on there. So there's all really good elements that I would normally like. I don't like this one though. And every time I look at it, the one thing that really sticks out and really spoils this for me is that dragon. The face on it doesn't work for me. I don't know if it's the angling. It almost looks like a human type face. It's got the eyes and the nose that you can kind of make out, and then just a big jaw underneath it. It doesn't look like there's any snout, which is what I would really associate with a dragon. And this one just looks weird for not really having a visible, to me, snout. The main thing other than that though is it kind of just looks like it's hanging there on a string. There's no real sense of motion to this dragon. It's supposed to be, what I would gather, it's supposed to be kind of wheeling around in the air with this warrior mage beneath him or it, but it just looks like it's plonked there. There's no motion, there's no urgency. It just kind of doesn't look right, and for that I think it really spoils the book cover for me in general. It's one of those things that I can't unsee, and that really does spoil it overall for me. So I'm going to put this one in not a fan, because it does have a really big impact for me. Speaking of dragons, we've got another one here, which again looks a little bit strange actually, if I'm honest. This one is Dragons of Fate. It's a Dragonlance or Dungeons and Dragons novel by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. I really like the artist actually. I follow him on Twitter. He's got some beautiful landscapes that I really love. His name is Philip Ehrlich. I do apologise if that's mispronounced, but I love his work. This isn't one of his best for me. I don't really like it. I said before about the faces, and that definitely comes to the fore here. They look a little bit weird. I think the hair of the middle character just kind of looks weird. Where it's in dreadlocks, the way it's, I guess, blowing around in the wind, almost makes it look a little bit like pixel art, and it just doesn't look quite right. It's one of those things that I can't quite put my finger on. Overall, I like this a lot more kind of expanded if you've got the wraparound, because I've seen the full cover, and it definitely looks better there for me. But cut down to what you can see for the cover, I don't know, it's just not quite right. It's okay, but it's not for me, so I'm going to put it in that second category. Next up, I've got one that I've not heard anything about. I literally just saw this cover and I can't even remember where. It might have been NetGalley, I'm not sure, but this is Embers Rising by Sterling Carmichael, book one of the Fixers. And it's very different to a lot of the covers that I've got on this list, but I really like it. It's just, I don't know what it is. I like the combination. I don't normally like this kind of border around it, but I think here it works fine. The colour kind of combination used for that is absolutely fine. I like the background, the kind of the cityscape there. Again, it's another one that's very symmetrical, but on the underside of it at least it's not. I like the moon that you've got there above it. I like the characters going across the bridge. It's almost got a kind of Peter Pan vibe to it in that sense for some reason. I don't necessarily like that you've got kind of a sunrise or sunset behind the bridge and you've got the moon above it. It's obviously two different scenes, of course, because there's no scaling that would work for the city and the people, but it just kind of looks a bit weird to have the both of them in the one. I like the reflection that you've got underneath, although it's quite big, so is that reflecting both the sun that's setting and the moon that's up there. I don't know, it's a little bit complicated in that sense, but I think overall it does work. I love the colour combination that you've got here. I think overall the design is a really nice one. I'm going to put it in, I like it a lot because I do, but those kind of issues there, those confusions that I have when I look at it in detail, just stop it from moving up a notch. So this is one where I've gone a little bit random with the ordering for some reason, not quite sure how I managed this, but I've got The Hunters next by David Ragg. This is a follow-up series to the Articles of Faith, I think it is, the Black Hawks and the Righteous. So this is set, I think, about 13 years later, and you can see from the design, although this one's got a lot more colour on it, you can see that it's got a very similar kind of design, a very similar aesthetic to those two previous covers. I think this one works quite well. It's one that I can definitely see as being a fantasy cover, but it's not really for me. Although I do quite like it, it doesn't really work for me. I think it's just the artwork. It looks a little bit too comic book, which doesn't work for me. So I think for that reason, I'm going to put it in. It's okay, but not for me, because I feel that's a pretty good description. Next we've got another Felix Ortiz piece. This is The Faded Dragon by Cameron Michaels, and although I didn't have the best time with the story, it just didn't work for me, so I wasn't able to finish it. I do quite like the cover here. I like the colours here. It's again one which has got a very muted tone to it with just the shades of blue, predominantly on there. I like that you've got the author name in that same shade of blue, but it still somehow stands out enough. But I really like both the font that's used, but also the colour for the book title, where it really does stand out. Overall, it's kind of weird. I like the sort of in-action shot that you've got, where it's a different kind of perspective to what you would normally see. I think that works well. Overall, it looks pretty cool as a cover, I think. I'm going to go with I like it a lot. It's not got that extra special element for me, but I do still quite like it a lot. And then another one that I can't quite put my finger on the reasons why, but another one that I do quite like is The Faithless by C.L. Clarke. And I think the artwork works well. It's got some nice colours, but they're almost discrete colours. There's some real vibrancy, but it's to the outer rather than to the middle. It's not bringing to attention the focal point of the cover, so it's a little bit weird in that sense, but it just works for me. I don't know why. Overall, as I say, I can't quite put my finger on what it is, but I do quite like this one, so I'm going to put it in I like it a lot. It's a little bit better for me than a solid cover, but it's definitely not one of my chef's kiss covers. Next up, we've got another one which is slightly out of place, because I've got this one down as Fire and Steel, but it's actually A Crucible of Fire and Steel by Jamie Edmondson. And I think the overall design is a bit weird with the background, but I quite like it actually. I think it works quite well. The artwork is fine. You've got the nice castle in the background there that I quite like, and the moon over the top of it is quite atmospheric. I think the thing that spoils this one for me is the titling. The title there, obviously I said I had this one down as Fire and Steel because that stands out more than A Crucible of. That's fine, that's okay. But I think it's just a little bit misplaced where it goes over that bottom border there. It doesn't quite look right. Even just moving the whole title up just a little bit to get it on the picture rather than going over the border, I think would improve that aspect. But I don't like the author name at the top at all. With the colour that's used, even with a bit of shadow to it, it doesn't stand out. It gets lost amongst that patterning at the top. So overall, I don't think this is one for me in terms of the type of book that it looks like. I could be wrong, I really don't know, but it's not one that's a terrible cover in any way. I'm going to put this one in a solid cover because I think it does work quite well. Another one that I think works quite well is J.D.L. Roselle's The First Ancestor, and this is book 2 of the Titan Wilds, and I think this is another Felix cover. So we've got here, I like the character, and I've said about this before, the character facing away. I definitely appreciate that. I like that you've got the two swords kind of held almost at ease there, and then when you actually look at it a bit closer, when you've got the full cover in front of you, you realise actually no, it's a bow, and I don't know why that stands out to me, but I quite appreciate it. I love the kind of almost lightning balls that you've got roaring through the sky. That's really weird. It's really cool. It's really atmospheric. I like the titling overall. I like the landscape that you got in the background. I like pretty much everything on here. Again, it's another one that's got very muted colours. It's quite samey, but the author name, the series name, the book name, all really stand out well against that, and the character does as well, so it's a really good job there. I think this one is one of my favourites in this little collection. I'm going to put it in Chef's Kiss. And then we have The King Killing Queen by Sean Speakman, and I don't know what it is about this cover, but I really like it. I just think that it works very well. It's kind of, again, very samey in terms of the colours, but everything that needs to stand out does stand out. The artwork in it, the actual quality of it, I think is really good. I really like the composition of it. It just works for me. I like that you've got blazing sun in there, but you can't really see it because it's coming through that, I guess, kind of stained glass window. It's all one colour, but it's still the same kind of aspect of stained glass. I just think it works really well, and this may be my favourite out of this entire collection, and I don't even know why. It just really works well for me. So obviously this is going in Chef's Kiss. And then straight off the bat, I'll say it, we go from possibly my favourite to possibly my least favourite. This is The Lost War by Justin Lee Anderson, and this is a previously self-published book. It won SPFBO 6, I think it was, and it's got quite a nice cover. The kind of a mage, I think it is, coming towards the camera, the reader, whatever, and it's all in reds and whites, and I think works really well. This is the traditionally published re-release cover, and I really dislike it. It's kind of weird. I haven't read it yet, but it's weird going from those kind of reds and whites to the almost luminescent greens and whites here. You've got kind of the characters who don't look like they're all together. I mean, there's grass there, and you've got grass around the feet of the characters in the front, so presumably they're all in this blinding white field of grass. You've got the character at the top there who is just kind of faded. He's like negative space. He's just got his arms and his head's there. His head. He's only got one of them. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. It looks a bit confused for me. The main thing that I don't like about this though is the colours. The black and the green kind of works well, but I think that green for the main part, the bit that really pops out of the green at the top is just too bright. The white on it though is just far too bright. It is, as I said, pretty much blinding against those other colours. It just really doesn't work for me. I'm going to stop talking about it so I can get it off my screen, because if I had another category that was below not a fan that takes this one off the page, I'd put it in there. Okay, so moving on from that one and trying to readjust my eyes, because they are genuinely kind of, it's a bit like I've been looking at the sun. That is such a bright cover. We go on to the Malevolent 7 by Sebastian de Castell, and this one, it's an okay cover. I like that you've got the 7 on there. It's 6 on a dog, which is unusual. I'm presuming that's the 7 that you get in the story. And then it says, you think, wizards, think again. Well, maybe one of them is a dog. Maybe it's a shapeshifter. I don't know. I've not read this one. Maybe I will in the future. I don't know. But I like the titling. I like the overall colours. There's just something about it that doesn't quite work. It kind of says, although I think the story is maybe one for me, and I like the author from what I've read of him, the cover kind of says this one isn't for me, so it's a bit of a weird one. I'm going to put it in that second bottom category. It's okay, but not for me. This is kind of the other way around. I don't really like the cover, but I think the book may be for me. Then we have Mystic Reborn. This is the second book by Jeff Spate in his Archives of Evelium. I don't know if it's kind of an ongoing series, whether it follows Paladin Unbound or if it's just another story in the world. But this one I know a lot of people like, and I may disappoint them by saying I don't like it at all. I mean, there's elements of it I like. I like the winged person that you've got there at the bottom with a nice big sword, and you've got the dragon there, and there's kind of this green glowing ember in the mouth there, which he's about to use to attack, I assume. I think the overall kind of design and composition is fine. The titling is fine. The colours of the titling is fine. I don't like the colours overall. I think for me, it spoils this book. Purely on a personal level, I like the individual colours, but I just don't think they go well together here. It can be done. There's covers like Eclipse by Herman Stauernagel, which I've not included in here because it's a sci-fi. It's got very similar colours though, but it's in a space kind of setting. You've got predominantly black and then those pinks and purples and blues, and it works well. I think they complement each other quite well. Here, there's too much of them. It's like the top corner is purple, the next corner is pink, down below you've got kind of the greens as well. And I think it's more that they're in competition with each other rather than complementing each other. So for me, it just doesn't quite work. And I'm going to put this in the bottom category because it makes me not a fan of it. Okay, next in my run through Felix Ortiz covers, we've got No Heart for a Thief by James Lloyd Doolin, book 1 of his Malatu series, which I did quite enjoy when I read this one. I think the cover is one which does tell a story as far as the book goes, so I do appreciate that. But overall, I think this is a pretty good cover. It's one of the ones where I'm kind of middle of the road in terms of the artwork. If I was grading Felix Ortiz art, it wouldn't be right at the top, it wouldn't be right at the bottom. It is kind of middle of the road in that respect. I think it's a good cover overall. The character really stands out with those kind of flashes of red, and I like the kind of blues that you've got behind it as well. It gives some good colour contrast to the image itself. I like the titling there, although the cross piece of the T for thief is just a little bit weird coming out of the H there. It just doesn't quite work perfectly, but that's a very small criticism overall. I think I'm going to put this one in a solid cover because it's just not quite one of my favourites. It's not quite one that I like a lot, but it's very close to actually. Then we have The Price of Power by Michael Michel, and this one is kind of an odd cover in a sense because there's not really a vast amount to it. Again, it's one of the ones where you've got the full artwork, the wraparound shows you a bit more, gives you a bit more of the story. I think you've got some actual buildings that you can make out in that one. I quite like this one. It's a kind of almost a standard fantasy white cover where you've got a solid background and then some elements on top of it, but I like that it's kind of made into the image, if that makes sense, rather than just being some items placed on a white background. I do appreciate that. I like the text, even though it's really big, it's really bold to have the text so large on the cover, but I think it works well. Probably the one thing that I don't like about that is that it's off-centered. The price of, and then you got power is more to the left, just so you can you stop the price of kind of going over the character there. But again, that's a small criticism. I like it overall. It's not perfect, but I think it works as a good, solid fantasy cover. Another slightly weird one that we've got here really is Primal Fury Trial of the Berserker by Noel Traver, and this is one of those covers that I think really works well in some particular ways. So the thing that really does speak to me on this one is just those little flashes of blue, even if you take it out of the kind of title or subtitle series name, I guess, Trial of the Berserker there. If that wasn't there, or if it was in a different colour, I might even like it a little bit more, because then you've just got the little flashes kind of in the 3D element of the title Primal Fury, and then it's just the little markings on this great hulking berserker kind of bear there, or as one of the members on my Discord, I think it was, called it, a bearzerker. Missed opportunity there. So I think overall it's quite good. I like the artwork. I think it's, again, kind of a bold one. It just really stands out. It makes you want to learn more about this book and this series because it's just different. It stands out from the crowd in that respect. And I think for that, and because I like the colours where you got those little flashes of blue, but also little kind of almost glowing bits of orange there. Some of them are, by the looks of it, little sparks flying through the air. I do like it overall. I'm going to put this in. I like it a lot, because I just think it's really cool, it's really nice, and I enjoy looking at it. Another one that's got kind of a cool factor to it is The Pyres of Vengeance, Swords of Dominion Book 2 by N.C. Kousis. And I think this one, I really like the colours on it. It definitely says werewolf to me, and I'm not a fan really of werewolves at all, but I like the artwork here. I like the depiction. I like what it tells me about the story, where you've got a sword and what's that, 4 arrows sticking out of this beast, and you've got all these other weapons sticking out of the ground around him. I think that works really well. I like that you've got a definite foreground and background to this, and I love the colours in the background there. The titling works really well and stands out very well as well. There's a lot to like about this book. I'm going to put it in I like it a lot because I think it works really, really well. And who knows, maybe if I was a fan of werewolves, I'd move it up a category. Okay, so this is one of the titles that I've seen a lot of people raving about. This is Seven Faceless Saints by M.K. Lobb. And it's again, it's quite a different cover. It's a bit of a bold one. I like that it's kind of white, but it's not white. It's there's all these cracks on it, and it's a very off shade of white, so to speak. I like the kind of city that you've got there, and the way it's almost like a model. It's a carving, and you've got the kind of the weeping statue above it there. I think that all works well. I like the text on it. I like the colour overall, with the red really bringing out the author name, and the blood that's going through and kind of flowing over bits of the building there. Overall, I don't think it's for me. It's okay, it definitely does a good job. I'm going to put it in the second bottom category though, because yeah, it's not one that's for me, but I do definitely appreciate it. Talking of appreciation, we have A Shade of Madness next by Thiago Abdallah, and this is another one that people have been raving about, and I love the colours on this one. Those blues and blacks and whites really work well. I like the titling on there, and that you've got the Madness has just got a few bits of the middle letters there missing, the same as on A Touch of Light, so I like that you've got the theme. Although the covers are very different in content and colour, I like on the two of them when you put them together that the titling and the author name really matches up. I like that kind of symmetry across the series. This one, I love the griffin on there, the spear or whatever it is at the bottom is almost missed out there really, because you're not focusing on that because of this beautiful beast that's in the middle there. Overall, it just works really well for me. It's gaining a lot of praise because of the way it looks, and I think it's well deserved. I'm going to put this in Chef's Kiss. Next up is the next book that I'm going to be reading. This is The Shadow Casket by Chris Wooding, book 2 in the Darkwater Legacy, following up The Ember Blade. And again, this is one that's got kind of a symmetry across the two book covers in the series. The font that's used for the title is the same, and I think it works really well, and I like that it's red here, so it really stands out. You've also got the symmetry in what you've got in the picture though, because you've got kind of the mountains and a waterfall and the castle at the top, and then a person facing away, or two in this case, down at the bottom there. Here it does look a bit more like you've got two completely different pictures. It doesn't even look like you've got kind of some mist separating, giving you separation between the top and the bottom. It looks like it is just two separate pictures, so that kind of spoils it a little bit for me, if I'm honest. Also, I think the bottom especially just really looks like a photograph. I've seen the end papers on the special edition, I think it's maybe the broken binding one, where it's got kind of that bottom imagery without the people perhaps as the end papers on the book, and it just looks like a photograph to me. It's really kind of weird in that respect, so it's kind of a little off-putting in that respect. I think it works overall. It's a solid cover, but it's not one that I like as much as the Ember Blade even. I'm going to put it therefore in that middle category. And then another shadowy title. This is Dragon Spirits Book 2 by L.L. McRae, and it's The Shadow Gate. And again, this is one that when I was going through these last night with my wife, she picked out this one as one that she really liked. I love the font on here. I love the brightness, the vibrancy of the colours. It's maybe a little bit more kind of glowy than book 1, The Iron Crown, but I don't mind that. And again, I like that. You put these two covers together, you can tell they're part of the same series. I really like that from one book to another. I think on here, maybe the author name could stand out a little bit more. It does get a little bit lost with those really brightly glowing I don't know if it's sparks because they're going around in the circle there, but kind of a spark over the second L in particular, I think really just detracts from the author name ever so slightly. But overall, I think this is good. And because of the kind of difference in the production, where the author doesn't go through Amazon or Ingram, she has a company that produces these for her, and she sells them herself rather than going through normal, I would say, distribution. This one I think is going to look really nice. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of it, because I think with the spot varnishing, the spot UV used on these covers, is just going to really look great. I'm going to put it in. I like it a lot because I do, and I anticipate from that liking it more in physical form rather than just looking at it digitally as I am now. Next up is The Surviving Sky by Kritika H. Rao, and this is kind of a weird one. It's one that I've seen the kind of concept a few times. It's almost like a floating kind of city. It's also a bit of a weird one because just the way it looks for me really, where you've got the clouds kind of separating a little bit, but it's kind of solid clouds down at the bottom there, so it looks like it's taken a chunk out. And also it seems like lots of little elements put together rather than one cohesive, I don't know, island, piece of land, whatever you call it, that's floating through the sky, because things are all at different scales. You've got, it looks like a person in one aspect, and you've got kind of skyscrapers in other aspects, and it doesn't quite fit together naturally for me in that respect. I quite like the text going through it. It's kind of built into the picture there, I appreciate that. The colours overall I think are okay, not necessarily special, but I think they work, you know, they don't really detract. I do like how it's kind of light and bright at the top in terms of the weather, and then kind of dark and stormy underneath, although there's a kind of disconnect in that sense there as well, I guess. Overall, I'm going to go with it's okay, but not for me, because I mean, the book itself I don't think looks like it's one that's going to be for me, but in terms of the cover, it's not the type of cover that I generally gravitate to. Speaking of which, we've then got Cassandra Clare's Swordcatcher, and this is, if I'm remembering rightly what I read about it, this is her kind of adult fantasy debut. I may have got that a bit wrong, but it's kind of a basic cover in terms of there's not a vast amount to it. It's all in colours and silhouettes, and it's a kind of standard cover, I guess, in many ways. I do like that you've got a bit of variation with the kind of pattern, almost grading around the outside. I've said before about these kind of borders, and this goes maybe a little bit beyond that, beyond most other books, because you've got 2 or 3 different aspects of those borders. You've got the cityscapes, and it looks like a kind of an upside down city in the bottom element of that, so that's kind of a little bit weird. Overall, I don't mind it. The font is fine. I do prefer, although I understand the reasoning for it, I do prefer the author name to be a bit smaller, but that's the selling point in the main here. But it's an okay kind of cover overall. It's not one that's for me. It's again not one that I would normally tend to gravitate to, but I think artistically, thematically, I guess everything works on there. It's not one that I would say is a solid cover. It's okay, but it's not for me. And then another one that's slightly weird in that what I'll say about it, I can't really put my finger on a lot of the elements. This is The Sword Defiant by Gareth Hanrahan, and it's one that I quite like, even if it's a little bit unusual or a little bit different to a lot of the book covers that I do normally go for. I think the text works fine, although the author name just does merge a little bit too closely with the colour of the sword where it overlaps there. The artwork is fine. I'm intrigued by what's going on here, and it's kind of a weird pose that the character on the front there's got with the sword, and he's kind of reaching back almost for it. Overall, I think it works pretty well, but there's just something about it, and maybe it's that glowing red blade, but I do quite like this. I'm going to say I like it a lot. Now we have Thick as Thieves by MJ Kuhn. This is book 2 in, I don't know if there's a series name actually, but this is a follow-up to Among Thieves, and I do love the cover of that one. I think it's really cool and atmospheric with those blues, and this one kind of has the similar theme. It's a different colour and it's a very different cover in general, but it looks like it's got the same kind of thematic aspect to it. This one I don't like nearly as much. I just think it's a little bit plain. I like that you've got the 2 characters at the top there, and again they're in shadow as befits thieves. You can't really see their faces, which I like, but I think it's just, I wouldn't say bland, but it's not too far away from bland in terms of how it looks with those kind of muted colours, and I think it's because it's a nighttime kind of scene. You can't really make out a vast amount of detail. You have to look really closely. The detail is there, but you have to look really closely for it. I think it works. It just, the bit that really draws the eye is at the top where the title is, and you've got the 2 characters, and then you've kind of got this big open space in the middle of it, really, in between the title and the author name. And I think to elevate it for me, I would just want to see a little bit of something there, but at the moment it just looks not quite right with that missing. So I'm going to say it's okay. I think it works okay as a cover, but it's not for me. The next one I've got on my list is Traitor of Redwinter by Ed MacDonald, and this is one that's got lots of colours on it, and they're colours that I think actually do work okay. If we go back to what I said about Mystic Reborn, you've got the opposite here. I think the colours do complement each other because they're not competing for the same space, and I like it. I appreciate it in that respect. The style of the artwork isn't really for me. It's not one that I generally go for. It's kind of weird as well, some of the aspects of it. The hands look a little bit weird for me, and also those kind of floating feathers, I presume that means something. I think they were on the first book cover as well, the Daughter of Redwinter. Overall, it's okay. it's kind of weird as well. I've just noticed how you've got this kind of really wavy flowing white hair of this character in the front, and wherever they get to the end of the background characters kind of silhouette, if you like, they just disappear. They're cut off. It's a little bit weird. They don't even go onto the feathers behind her. I can't quite work out what's happening there. It's like it's just been cut. And yeah, it's an odd one. The text on it is pretty cool. I think the author name doesn't quite stand out, but at the same time it does. It stands out enough. It's a bit of an odd one in that respect. I like the blues at the top to the kind of reds at the bottom. I think that kind of flows with the two characters you've got there. But yeah, overall it's okay, but I'm gonna say it's not for me. Next up, we've got Tress of the Emerald Sea, a Cosmere novel by Brandon Sanderson, or Totes, as some people have started to abbreviate it to. And I might get lynched by some Brandon Sanderson fans here, because the last time I did one of these videos, I put one of his covers in Not a Fan in my bottom category, and I'm going to do the same here. I don't like this cover. It's really, really not for me. And I don't mind the design. I think the text on it is actually quite nice. It works really well. It stands out somehow. But the main thing for me is the colours. I think that green is just too dark, and there's not enough contrast, even though you've got the green to the yellow. It's almost a greeny yellow as well. So I don't know if that's just because there's so much green there, it kind of seeps into the yellow and it's actually yellow, but it looks greeny yellow to me. I'm rambling on that respect. But overall, it just doesn't really have anything that really shouts out to me, except the text of, well, at least the title. I like it, and that's really not a good thing to be saying about a cover when none of the other elements are really standing out to you. So yeah, I'm going to put this in Not a Fan, because I'm just not. I don't know what it is about it. I think it just needs a bit more colour to it. One that does have a bit more colour to it is Trial of Thieves, Book 2 of the Assassin Fantasy series by John Cronshaw. That's a bit weird. It's not just the Assassin series or anything, it's the Assassin Fantasy series. So is that a fantasy series about assassins, or is that a series called Assassin Fantasy? I don't know. That's not what I'm here for anyway, so let's ignore it. This one's got kind of one of those photorealistic types of covers, or at least the character that's on there. I like the glowing blade he's got. It kind of looks a bit weird, the way he's holding it. I'm not sure if that works perfectly. Some of the straps that he's got on him aren't really kind of following the movement of the rest of him, so that's a bit kind of weird. Overall, it's okay. I don't mind the colours in it, with that flash of light for the blade, and randomly as well the Eye of Trial. I don't like the buildings behind him, because again we go to that symmetry. You can tell that they are just one set of buildings that's been mirrored on the other side, so that's a bit weird. It seems a bit odd to have in this kind of design, but never mind. I'm going to go with overall it's okay, but it's not for me. I don't like the photorealistic character that's on there as a general rule, and I think on here there's not enough else that kind of takes me away from that. Next up, we've got another one which is technically out of place. This is The Trials of Ilderwood by S.C. Selvin, but the actual title of this particular book, this prelude, is Fall of the Forsaken. So this is one of those ones where I kind of sound contradictory, because there's not a lot of colour variation on here, but it's one where it works for me. I love that that tree in the background that's kind of been split open, and you've got this kind of magical glow in the middle of it. I like the characters standing in front of it. It tells a bit of a story. I like the text that's on there. I'm not too sure on the W. That's basically a W with a V on top of it. The way it's set out there, it looks kind of weird, but that's the only thing that I don't like about it. The text itself I think works well. In general, it's a bit of a dark cover in terms of the colours, but it still works for me. Everything that needs to stand out I think does stand out, and it does bring attention to those characters, even though they're very small in respect to the rest of the cover. So I'm going to say I like this quite a lot, because it just works well for me. Now we've got Richard Swan's second book in his, what's the series called? Is it Empire of the Wolf? I'm not sure. But this is The Tyranny of Faith, following up the Justice of Kings. And this one, I presume, is Von Volt's associate. I can't remember her name actually, but she was the point of view character telling the story in Justice of Kings. It's again one of those covers that a lot of people have been raving about, but I don't know, there's just something about it. It almost kind of seems like it's trying too hard. Again, with the first book cover, loads of people were absolutely falling over themselves to praise it, and I think maybe this one's a victim of the success of that one. I don't know. The overall composition is kind of a little bit weird. It's like you've got a statue and then the character's standing on the plinth in front of the statue. Why would she be doing that? I don't know. I like the character herself. I think she looks pretty cool. The statue behind it looks really weird, but it's just one of the elements of the world. I don't really like the text, I have to say, the way that it's positioned. So you've got the above her head and then tyranny and faith are there, but then of looks like it's been spaced apart so that you can still get the blade going down in between them. It just doesn't quite work for me overall. I think it is still a solid cover, despite the, I would say, unusual colour combination for a fantasy cover. I think it does work. It's just a touch above it's okay, but not for me. So I'm going to put this one in as being a solid cover. Then we have The Warden by Daniel M. Ford. I'm looking forward to getting into this one. I do have a digital arc of this on my Kindle ready for me to read just before it comes out in April. I like this cover. I don't know what it is about it. It's very odd. It's got kind of a very contrasting combination there of that pale blue and the pink, but it just works really well here. I think it's really well designed in that respect. You can't really see any kind of enemy characters, I would say, but you've got these two characters who are facing the same way, so I assume they're together. And there's obviously kind of some magical battle going on, and the character at the front has got a sword drawn, so there's stuff going on there. And I like actually that it looks really kind of creepy with that really misshapen tree and stuff, but you can't see who they're fighting unless it is somehow the trees. But I think it works really well. I love the colour that's drawn with that kind of magical, what looks like shield around the spearmen at the front there, and coming from the lady's hand. I think it looks really cool. I love the colour combination. I like the font. I like that the title is ever so slightly transparent so you can see some of the elements behind it. But then you've also got bits of a tree here and there that go over the font. I just like that, the way that it's kind of built into the image there. I don't really like the a novel. We've got a couple of them, Among Thieves and Book 2 that we've seen here, Thick as Thieves, also say a novel on the front cover, and I don't like that because it's we know it's a novel pretty much, but here the font of it just doesn't quite look right, and it makes it almost look like a hovel instead of a novel, but that's by the by. Probably the one thing, it's a really weird thing, or let's say two things, that I don't really like about this. I'm not sure that the author name really fits in that font, but it's not a problem at all. It stands out fine. You can read it, but you can also kind of ignore it, which I do like, because I like to focus on the actual cover. But you've also got then a tagline at the top, "The forest calls them home," which has got 4 dots after it instead of the typical 3 dots for an ellipsis. So that's really weird, and it's really weird to focus on as well. I don't know whether that's the proofreader in me, but yeah, taking that aside, it's a really nice cover. I really like the colour combination that we've managed to get in the picture and the text there. It just works really well. This is one of my chef's kiss covers. Then we have The Will of the Many by James Islington. This is book 1 of his new series, or new upcoming series, Hierarchy. And I don't really have a vast amount to say about this one because there's not a vast amount going on. I don't really like that it's basically a cover that is just text. I know you've got the pillars behind them, but the text takes up the whole cover, and it's just line art behind it, so it doesn't really do much for me, I have to say. I don't mind the colours on it, but it's all a bit, I mean, it's just solid blue colour. in the background and then some gold on top of it and some white text. There's not a vast amount to say about that. It works well in the colour aspect, but I don't really have too many positives to say because I think it's a bit boring, if I'm honest with you, and I don't like how the M of many is basically just an upside down W. It's just rotated 180 degrees. It doesn't look right having that that crossover of kind of the two V's. It looks like it doesn't work for me as an M, and also the A just looks like a rotated V as well. I don't like that. I don't get it. It doesn't work for me. The N looks a bit weird as well with the double kind of aspect there. Overall, I just really don't like this cover. I don't like it. It's a weird one for me. It doesn't work. I'm going to go with not a fan. And then finally, you can breathe a sigh of relief. I come to my last cover in my list. This is Wraithbound by Tim Akers, which I think maybe book one, it doesn't say, but it's part of the Spirit Binder saga. This is a cool kind of atmospheric cover. It definitely reminds me of some of the Michael R. Fletcher covers, especially the omnibus cover for the Obsidian Path, and I quite like that. I like that you've got this really cool big beastie in the background there. It's not a conventional beastie. It's, you know, it looks like we've got some artistic license either from the author or the artist there, and I appreciate that. I like they've got this really weird, it looks like a sword, but when you look at it closely, they are chain links rather than it just being a sword blade, so that's pretty cool. You've got a character there facing him down, and you think, how is that one guy going to be able to take on and potentially defeat this beastie? And I think overall the cover is pretty good and it works well. It does kind of look a bit more like a comic book cover than a novel cover for me. Just the layout of it, I think, and the tagline or the blurb underneath there, a must for all epic fantasy fans, says Starburst. It just doesn't quite work there. I don't know about the placement on it maybe, and the Spirit Binder saga placement as well. But overall, I think the artwork, the composition, the overall design, what it tells me, I think works really well. I like this one a lot. I'm going to put it in that second category down. So there we go, 42 covers down, and now it's down to editing Don to do all the animations to show those lovely covers to you. I hope you've enjoyed the effort put into it and the look ahead at some of these great covers that you can look forward to. Let me know in the comments down below how you think I did. Would you have put any of these covers in different categories to the ones that I selected? Whilst you're down there, check out all the social media and support the channel links in the description box below this video, including my book club Discord and my Patreon if you want to come along and join me on this journey. I'll hopefully see you in the next video sometime soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.